This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. This week, I'm joined by two technical difficulties beset upon me by the techno-organic gods upon us. Nick White.
Hey.
And Kait Lamphere.
Hi.
You know, this episode was the hardest one we've ever had to record yet to this date, and no one knows why. Technology seems to hate us this day, so fingers crossed you get this episode at all. We're here to talk about comic books. Episode 300 is coming. Are you ready? Episode 300 is 5 weeks away. We've got a mini-sode coming next week. It's going to be me and Nick talking about Ice Cream Man, and then after that, it's just straight down the middle to episode 300, barring any technical difficulties. So get hyped. Make sure you're a part of the Discord. Make sure you come hang out with us for that episode. It's going to be what some people would call a hoot and a holler. I'm going to call it a little bit more than that. So get yourselves ready. It's going to be unbelievable. But until then, let's just talk about comic books that are coming out and what we've been reading right now. So I got a question. I got two questions. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Kait.
I've been good. My tomato plant is doing wonderful, which is really all that matters, right? That's it. I did download the Viz and the Shonen Jump apps because I didn't realize that there was one for each. I thought that it was the same thing. Anyway, they're mostly the
Common
same thing.
Yeah.
There did seem to be a little bit more on Viz, except that it was stuff that you also had to buy on top of the $2 a month subscription, which was weird. Fine, whatever. It gets me more books. Anyway, between libraries, Hoopla, webtoons, and publisher services like this, we really live in a beautiful time, at least for media access.
You know, but it's like cable subscriptions though, right? It's like as long as you pay $150 a month, you can have access to everything that you want.
True.
So much to the point where you can't even consume it all.
That's accurate.
I mean, Hoopla's free, webtoons is mostly free. I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah. Viz is only $2, but it still is a cost. It seemed like a lot of the series had the first 3 chapters for free, so at least you can like try it before you buy it or decide to subscribe for that month to read it or whatever.
Yeah, I do like that.
Anyway, I read a book called Dior by Annie Goetzinger. This was on Hoopla, and this is a biography about Christian Dior, who was a fashion icon earlier in last century. But it's presented as like a memoir by one of his models, except that the model is a fictional combination of a few different people. I didn't actually realize that until about the end of the book, because I was like, okay, where does her life go from here? Was she happy? Did she retire? What happened after this? And it turns out that she wasn't a real person. So
she faded away into the thought consciousness of the sky.
Yeah, but
wait, is this that Beatles movie where they never existed now?
Oh no.
Yes.
It was kind of a clever way to show different aspects of the fashion industry, though, because she starts as a fashion journalist and then she becomes a model. So you kind of saw like the third person perspective of the industry, and then she was in the industry. So it was like the inner perspective. So that was cool. And then also it kind of seems like, I haven't done a deep dive in Christian Dior, but based on the very little information about him that was actually in this book, it could just be a problem where there's not a whole lot known about him. I don't know if that's true, but if that is true, then it's like, that's a nice way to show this man that she occasionally runs into and to give his like information about him without actually having a lot of detail. The art was really simple, but very elegant, especially the dresses. The colors are really soft, and I thought they were really well used. This is by NBM Publishing, which I think must be a French Belgian publisher, because I've also read Lulu and New by Etienne Devedou by that publisher, which is also French Belgian bande dessinée. So there is more on Hoopla by the same publisher, and quite a few of their books are on my to-read list. Ironically or coincidentally, I watched Cruella a few days later, the live action Disney movie. Made the conscious
choice to watch Cruella, yeah.
And the scenes inside the fashion house that Cruella joins at one point, they're very similar to the scenes in Dior. And there's also commentary about like from fashion journalists and about fashion journalists. So it kind of felt like Disney had read this book as a reference, but I'm sure that they just used similar references. You know, it was just, I felt like I was on the ground floor of something, which was kind of fun. And just as a side note, I saw the Cruella Western style, like manga style comic. What? Yeah, there's like a prequel comic to the movie about them just being thieves in London, I guess. That's on the Viz app. It was not like part of the subscription for Shonen Jump, but it exists. So
it exists.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've done episodes about movie tie-ins and video game tie-ins and stuff. I think that there might be like a niche of like weird, obscure manga tie-ins that we could definitely talk about out in a whole episode. That would be really fun.
I would absolutely do that.
Hell yeah.
Give me a reason to read this book.
Well, Nick, what about you? What have you been up to? How have you been? How have comic books been? All that jazz.
I mean, the West Michigan Weather Watch would be don't go outside. I know I trumpet that a lot. I'm sorry that it's just consistent good advice. I can't help you in that regard. But really, really don't go outside. For about the past 4 or 5 days, we've been under a heat watch. We've been under an air advisory. The schools have been doing half days or closing because of the heat. And I certainly don't ever remember that growing up in West Michigan. I don't think I ever had a whole day of school canceled. And like, I don't mean like, oh, the air conditioner broke and now we're not going to have school. I mean like, the air conditioner's fine. We're not having school. So
Yikes.
Yeah, not great. I guess it's a perfect time to stay inside and read or do something else. I don't know, just hide in the freezer or something like that. In terms of things I've read, I did read Alien #6. This is by Philip Kennedy Johnson, written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, pencils by Salvador Larroca, colors by Guru EFX, letters by Clayton. It's Coles, right?
Yep.
Like with a fire, Coles.
You got it.
Yeah, got it. And covers by, and I'll just butcher this one, In Hyuk Lee. Gotta say that because honestly the covers are great and the interior artwork is really not that stellar. So here we are at the end of the first arc of Alien Comics at Marvel since Disney acquired 20th Century Fox. For those of you who missed out on my take on the rest of the series, I can tell you that reaching the end of the arc, my general feelings remain pretty much in the exact same places. The pencils are still something I have a major problem with. The androids look more like humans and the humans look more like synthetics or androids. The people just look weird and the aliens look like someone was photoshopping toys.
Still, even at issue 6, this is still like a problem.
I mean, it's the same artist doing the same sorts of things to achieve the same results. So I think Einstein once said something about the definition of an insanity involving photoshopping xenomorphs. So I think that there's something there to be said about it. But that said, the writing has been really interesting. I think Philip Kennedy Johnson, I think it was maybe nice that they brought in someone who sort of came in that wasn't like a big name like, I don't know, Bendis or Miller or
Jason Aaron.
Sure. Someone who I think people would have certain ideas or expectations or sort of tendencies about their writing and what they would want to do. And I think he really has done a stellar job of finding an interesting little niche or angle to sort of probe at within the Alien franchise. And I've really enjoyed that. When we get to the end of this issue, he injects a nice little trope of the Alien universe. I really don't want to say anything beyond that. That's about as far as I want to go in terms of that. I know a lot of people are waiting for this to go to MU or trade weight. So again, the tiptoeing is happening. The last thing I will say is the way he ends this book puts it in such a position that this could easily become sort of a serialized sci-fi story. There are some loose ends. It could easily become sort of an anthology sci-fi story a la Black Mirror. I think that's really, really great because honestly, personally, I'd be more happy if it went anthology, but I know that like trying to put an anthology stamp on a big 2 book doesn't fucking work. Like people will scream bloody murder and the book will almost certainly just like die, but I would like that.
You being the number one Alien fan, we should get on the horn with Marvel and get this all settled.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
No, this isn't Akira Yoshida. It's Nick White.
It'd be hard to tell the difference, I think, if you were on the phone with them. I don't think they'd be able to tell.
Yeah. So I'm very happy to see where this goes. I've seen the cover for 7, and it makes me think there might be something of a hard shift, but we'll see. We'll see. Beyond that, I also did read Tartarus Volume Number 1. This is written by Johnny Christmas, art by Jack T. Cole. This is an Image comic. There's so much to say about this book, and I'm probably not nearly smart enough to address half of it, maybe a third of it. I've been a big fan of Jack T. Cole. He drew the Unsound for Boom, and honestly, I enjoyed that, but Cullen Bunn did just it wasn't that good. But honestly, I've really loved what I've seen of Tartarus.
This book's fucking wild, is what it is.
It's God, like the narrative.
It's so hard to even describe this book without going into the absolute details of it, because it is such an absolute chaos ride.
It almost feels like you could only get this book if you had the writer already being an established artist, so that there was this sort of like visual, like proficiency of like relaying visual language between the writer and the artist. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like, and again, like there are plenty of people who are prose only writers who are able to convey to the artist or collaborate with the artist and get the results that they want, or work with the artist so that the artist can help them get the results that they want. Look, everyone's doing a great job. No one's doing a bad job. Okay. Like, all right. But I think sometimes when the writer has experience as an artist, I think sometimes the end product can be pretty amazing. And I wonder if this product can only be created because of that.
Right. Like Johnny Christmas, pretty stellar artist on his own, right?
Absolutely. And he draws the variant covers for this book. Mm-hmm. The geometry in this universe is just, it's like sort of Mobius-esque, but there's like a weird naturalist geometry to it. Like, remember the guy who has the golden mask, but it's made of like floating cubes? Mm-hmm. God, it's so... Everything looks technologically advanced, but it also looks like organic and natural, and it all has this weird, bizarre symmetry to it, and there's influences of like mysticism and magic and like modern technology. There's also stuff involving like tarot cards, and I can't even get into... You have to read this book.
Well, can you give like a high level overview of what the book is though, Nick?
Sure. Like the 2-sentence summary would be, you have this young woman. She is sort of making her way through the ranks of this in this organization, this sort of military organization. You've got these 2 warring factions, right? And as she gets older, she sort of discovers that her mother was this warlord who basically kicked off and massively worsened this like galactic conflict, right? And she discovers this about her mother, and then a lot of the people around her are, especially like her higher ups, are worried that there might be some sort of like loyalty issues now that she's discovered who her mother was. So they basically are like, yeah, like, sorry, like, we're really worried you're gonna go rogue on us now. And so she escapes to this colony, very, very dangerous colony called Tartarus, which is basically space Australia. Okay.
I mean, yeah, I can't argue with you on that.
Like Australia, 19th century. I don't know what modern Australia is like. Maybe modern Australia is just as dangerous. It probably is.
Yeah. This book is wild. I had to wait for all the issues to come out to read the first arc, but it pays off so well. Like I think I read the first 2 or 3 issues when they first came out, and I was just like, this is really hard to follow month to month. And then I read it all as a quote unquote collection after the last issue of the arc came out, and it's wonderful. And the second arc is just as good. So I think if you're looking for some wild and out there shit, I think Nick, you described it perfectly as like Mobius-esque feeling, and it like taking that idea of like French sci-fi and really putting an American spin on it, I think is a good descriptor of this book.
Like, I think if someone has a real language for art, or has like an art background, I think you're gonna go wild with this book, because like I know enough that I could spot things and be like, well, I know that's like, there's a name for this, right? Or this is a sort of influence and I've seen it before, but I don't know what to call it. Just the art and the influences in this book are just absolutely bonkers. And if anything else, you owe it to yourself to just go check out this book, just because the art is absolutely insane. It's so good.
100% agree. Well, for me this week, I read a handful of things. I, for some reason, just can't seem to pick up comic books, and it's really annoying. Like, I feel like I went a couple months on where I was just reading half dozen issues or chapters a day, and then the last 2 weeks have just been like dead as far as comics are concerned. But I think that's all turned around now that I've, I don't know, gotten out of this weird funk, because I started reading a bunch of stuff like over the last couple of days, and I feel like I'm ramping right back up to just read constantly every day. So I sat down and I read Barbaric number 2 and 3. I know a lot of folks on our Discord told me I needed to read Barbaric, and I read number 1. I loved it, and I forgot that 2 and 3 came out. Picked those up. This is written by Michael Marici, art by Nathan C. Gooden, pencils and inks, I should say, colors by Addison Duke, letters by Jim Campbell, designed, I think that's the logo, by Tim Daniel. Ultimately, this is a really cool book. Fantasy, the core of it is there's a barbarian, and he can only do good because his axe that is blood hungry is compelling him to do so. And if he doesn't do the right thing or do good, I don't know, something bad might happen. We haven't really explored that too far, but this is the end of issue 3, was the wrap up for the first arc, and there's kind of a question mark as to whether or not there's going to be more of this, or if it's going to go on a break, according to Danny in our Discord. But yeah, not often do you hit a decent stride of a story in 3 issues. I think Marici did something pretty impressive as far as comics are concerned in telling a short, concise, interesting story that had a beginning, middle, and an end. I mean, you think like on paper, 3 issues, 3 arcs of a story, or 3 acts of a story, easy peasy. But I feel like some writers can't even do that in 4 or 6, and it always falls flat, or it feels like they're filling things up with too much garbage. And I feel like Marici did a fantastic job of wrapping this up, and I'm glad that it was short, because if you would have stretched this story out any longer, I think it would have overplayed itself. But yeah, this is a really fun, reusable idea. This barbarian character who's going out and has to do the right thing because his axe, who's blood hungry, tells him that he needs to. Typically, doing the right thing means killing a lot of people who are filled with a lot of blood. And yeah, that's really fun. It feels a lot like, Witcher or Conan or, any other like loner character out there. And of course, now he's got a new friend who's a witch, even though he hates witches. So like, hilarity ensues, and I think Marici's really good at telling really dry, blunt humor. I think he does it really well in Wasted Space when he needs to, and this book is no different. I think I'm also a sucker for fantasy books, so like a lot of this just hits home for me. The one final thing I'll say about this though is Nathan Gooden's art is stupendous, and I was shocked initially when this was a monthly book. I was like, there's no way this guy keeps up. There's just no way. But finding out that it's only 3 issues for now makes a lot more sense. And honestly, the more I look at this guy's art, the more I look through Barbaric, the more I'm like, I need to buy something from him. If I can ever be in the presence of this person and I can pony up the cash for it, I think I need to get something original or get a page out of this book or something else that he's done. And I looked into it a little bit further. I was like, maybe he's doing commissions. Maybe he's done. No, he's the art director for Vault Comics. So I'm guessing that he's probably not doing like commissions and stuff. But I will say it makes sense that, he's the art director. I think he's got a good eye for things, because obviously I think every book that's come out of Vault Comics has been beautiful and in its own unique way. And I think he's got a very good eye for talent. But yeah, this is solid. I think everybody who likes fantasy Conan style stories, or like I said, The Witcher, I think would really love this. And Gooden's art will sell you. Page 1 even of the first issue, you will be sold. So highly recommend this one. The other book I want to talk about really quick is The Trial of Magneto number 1. I read that. X-Men Trial of Magneto number 1. This is by Leo Williams with Valero City on art. A lot of my summary of this issue. Sorry, I wrote this really late last night and I forgot. The summary of this issue is in which many people say, "Oh, you done did it now, Magneto. You're going to be in trouble." Because that is it for 22 pages. It's people going, "Oh, Magneto, you are just bad." And he goes, I'm not bad. And they go, but you were bad in the past. He goes, we're supposed to forget all that. And they're like, we are supposed to forget all that. You were a bad man, Magneto. And it's just a circle for 22 pages. This book feels weird, though, without an X Factor book. If only because I liked this on the whole. I think it's a really interesting story, as goofy and stupid as the first issue was, and just a lot of people pointing fingers and going, "You are such a bad guy, Magneto." Like, that's the whole issue. But it's interesting, the idea of the Hellfire Gala. For those of you who didn't follow, spoilers, it ended with the Scarlet Witch getting killed. And the question is, who did it and why? And why wasn't there a sign of a struggle? And the X Factor comic book was basically becoming this police investigative group, like X Factor has been in the past, and then it got canceled. So it feels weird that the focus of this issue is the X Factor team of a book that got canceled doing the investigation without an X Factor book. And I know that there's drama around it, also this stuff. I didn't even look into it very much because I knew it was just going to make me mad. But right. Yeah, this book is really, really cool. The one thing I will say, though, is that it's a shame that X Factor and Way of X ended, because those were the only two books, in my opinion, that were really trying to put the non-KP questions into the world of Hoxpox. Like, how do we handle the bodies of the recently deceased if you can be brought back to life? What's the ethical line of releasing the dead and bringing them back? Like, who do we choose gets backed up and who doesn't, and why? And if you are a mutant who loses their powers, where do you draw the line on that? And what does it mean to actually follow the rules of Krakoa? And a lot of really interesting semi-philosophical questions about this world that Jonathan Hickman established with the X-Men line, and all the X books have kind of been perpetuating it. And now we only have the Trial of Magneto that's kind of talking about this. And I know a lot of the other books talk about it every once in a while, but I don't think that any of the comics like Way of X or X Factor were really digging into the nitty-gritty, interesting side of things, the stuff that I think a lot of fans are asking themselves and we're talking about outside of reading the comics. So instead of having books that were answering these questions that we had about, like the ethical lines of doing X, Y, and Z in this weird, you can't die, but what happens when you have a weak loss of memory and all this other stuff, we don't have a book that's that cares about that anymore, and it kind of sucks. This book's probably going to be fun. It's probably going to smash one of the pillars of Hoxpox. That's going to be fun. We're going to see basically everything that they've been building up for the last couple of years kind of crumble in some way, as one of the big people that pushed the entire move to Krakoa kind of get arrested, maybe go to the bad place forever. We'll see. So it's going to be interesting. We don't even know who done it. But I think the next couple of issues are still going to be like, but Magneto, you are so bad. You are just bad because you did bad things in the past. That's what it's going to be. So, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, halfway through your list of philosophical questions, I think I just went into college lecture mode and just zoned out. So maybe you did answer this, but
sure.
Magneto is just resoundingly old at this point, right?
Yeah,
he was
pretty much.
He was, I mean, obviously went through what he went through during World War II and all of that terrible
he
stuff.
He survived the Holocaust, yes.
Right, yeah.
It's okay to say that out loud.
I realize I phrased that very weirdly. Yeah, so how is he still alive? Is this a mutant thing now?
Yeah, Danny in the chat saying magnetic powers keep him youthful. Something like that. I don't know. He was alive as a teenager during the 40s, and yet he's still an old working man now, so I don't know.
I mean, you were saying that people can be brought back to life, but is this a Lord of the Rings immortality where it's you can live forever unless someone kills you?
These are the questions that we need answered as fans, man. And these are the things that some of the books were talking about, man. Again, Way of X had it. Way of X was there. Simon Spurrier was driving that conversation. And I don't know if that book got canceled or if it just turned into what the end was, and I don't want to spoil it, but because I think that's very interesting too. The end of that arc was very interesting, but I would have liked more of Nightcrawler trying to establish this pseudo-religion within Krakoa, asking these questions and trying to answer them in a dialogue with various other people who we know have very strong, moral and philosophical thoughts about the way that the world works, but they've all come to agreement underneath this thing on Krakoa. I could do the whole episode about this, so we're just gonna have to move on. But yes, Nick, your question of how old is Magneto and how is very important. And I don't think we're ever going to get an answer because, unfortunately, unlike any other X-Men, Magneto is tied back to a very specific date-specific thing. Whereas the rest of the mutants, it's not like they were born on the 4th of July in 1976, nothing like that. So it's interesting to see how Magneto is aging, and Professor X is supposed to be the same age as him. So that means they're both old, which means when did the X-Men start? Which kind of like puts into question this forever shifting timeline that Marvel has about their characters.
And like Wolverine's resoundingly old, but of course they have all sorts of excuses and rules and whatnot that explain that away. And so we can neatly put that on the shelf and not have to have the dumb discussion we're having right now.
Yes. Danny says blame Franklin Richards. And there's talks about skincare routines in the chat, so who knows? But anyways, let's move on and let's talk about comic books that we are either reading next. This is a new thing we're trying. And going into 300, trying all sorts of new stuff. This is one of those things we're trying now. Instead of doing comic picks every week, we're actually going to be doing like a what are you reading next, or what comic are you excited for coming out this upcoming week? Because, there are a lot of comics coming out every week. Sometimes we're just not up to date. Sometimes we just want to talk about other stuff. It's not necessarily that's coming out right away. So kind of shifting this segment of the show to what are you reading next, or what are your comic picks for September 1st, 2021? Let's start with you, Nick. What are you excited for? What are you reading next?
So for me, it's definitely, I think this is going to shock everyone the world round, but I'm pretty excited for the next issue of Black Hammer Reborn, written by Jeff Lemire, pencils by Caitlin Yarsky, colors by Dave Stewart, letters by Nate Picos. Yarsky, I have to admit, like, going into Reborn, I wasn't really that familiar with her. I saw some of her artwork that she did for the series Bliss and Coyotes. Both respectively at Image Comics, and kind of was, I don't know, it seemed very much, a lot of it was a let's sit down at a coffee table and talk for a whole page's worth of panels, maybe several pages. And that's not a knock against that. There are plenty of good books that are like, let's sit down and have a discussion for a couple pages. It's not a bad thing, but if you know Black Hammer, you know that it is a book that will have some action sequences in it. It's not wall-to-wall splash pages, but it does have action sequences. And so I was like, well, I don't really know how this is going to work. But having read the first 2 issues now, you sort of get a feel that this book is sort of half domestic drama, half action. And so it actually works. And she's actually much more up for the task of drawing some very bizarro and out there things that this book channels.
Oh, yeah.
For those unaware, this book deals with the new Black Hammer. Lucy, is it Rivers? Why am I not? Weber. I'm sorry. Weber. Right. So her father was Black Hammer, and then she discovered this, and she became Black Hammer. And then this book, Reborn, flashes forward 20 years from when we last saw her. Now she's trying to raise a family. Marriage is falling apart. Her kids are being a real pain in the ass. She's dealing with other issues with them, which I don't want to get into.
Classic superhero problems, though.
Right. I mean, it really, there's a lot of the whole, like, it definitely has a lot of that Spider-Man, like, vibe of, like, there's a lot of things going on at home and issues with family members and all sorts of other, there's an abundance of real world problems. So I think that's probably what I was getting at. I wasn't wild about issue 1, but honestly, issue 2 brought in Skulldigger, who is like one of my new favorite characters. I love the costume. Yes, it looks an awful lot like sort of like the Black Parade costumes for My Chemical Romance, and maybe that has something to do with it.
I didn't even put that together.
Yeah. It's true. But having Skulldigger in issue 2, minor spoilers, lassoing and riding a space shark from another dimension sort of like sealed the deal that, like, if this is where this book is going, I'm on board. Let's do this. But I've enjoyed it. I really think the The solicit for this week is pretty boilerplate. 20 years ago, Lucy Weber fought madmen and monsters. Today, she finds her marriage falling apart and her children in danger. And now past threats and rogue heroes return to herald the end of the world. So it's basically a boilerplate soups solicit.
But it sounds awesome, though.
Yeah. I think what's much more revealing is that the cover for 3 shows a character that was a member of her rogues gallery holding a rose and a box of chocolates. So that's interesting.
The thing that I've always liked about Black Hammer is that as much as Jeff Lemire wants us to think we know what's going to happen, he has a handful of things up his sleeve just to keep his book kind of goofy and serious at the same time. And I think like this is one of those things. Like, why would you tell a story about this massive world-ending thing and then, or her marriage isn't falling apart and her children are in danger, and then the cover is like just some guy looking awkward? Like, what a weird juxtaposition, for a comic like this.
Yeah, and I think what's so clever about this series is that I think when people are trying to outsmart the book or anticipate the book, which maybe you should or shouldn't be doing that, I think people either sort of fall on the fence of like, oh, Jeff Lemire is either going to subvert the tropes about superhero books and I need to read it like that, or oh, Jeff Lemire is trying to, at this moment, like reinforce or discuss or actually basically replicate a lot of the superhero tropes so that later he can subvert them. And so like you're always like in the wrong, like you're always ready to be surprised basically, because he's going to pull the rug out from under you either way.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I keep forgetting that this series is by Jeff Lemire because it's so out there and so different than the things I've actually read by him.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like if you're like throwing it up against something like Essex Falls or
Essex County,
yeah, or what's the other one? I think I just mashed it up with
Gideon Falls.
Yeah, there's Gideon Falls. What's the one that he also drew where everyone is super sad and like the grandpa is like...
Hold on, you're gonna be more specific.
Oh no.
Royal City, Danny says.
Yeah, the one that might be like the saddest one, which I think is probably Royal City.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely...
Which Jeff Lemire book? Oh, the one where you feel bad?
Right. Well, I mean, like, I don't know. I think that, he's done a lot of superhero books, though. Like, I think this is him getting that, like, itch scratched without having to work for the big two, and I think working on his own schedule and getting to touch all the characters that he needs to and wants to. So, yeah, I think, like, it's a... Again, Nick and I are huge fans. I think like anybody who likes Jeff Lemire's writing is going to like these books. They're not all 100% winners, but they are overall very good. I think it's a really cool universe that he's established.
I think honestly the most important thing for me is that when you look at how long the series has gone on, how many spin-offs it's had, how many times there have been co-writers or he's handed over the reins or there have been artist shifts, I think the overall quality is pretty impressive when you consider all of that. Most of the time by now, with this many spin-offs, something would have to give. And like, yeah, like there are definitely 1 or 2 volumes that I would say are weaker volumes, but they're not terrible.
Yeah, 100% agree. Kait, what about you? What are you reading next, or what are you excited for this upcoming week or in the near future?
Yeah, there were a couple of different small press books I was interested in this week, but the one I decided to talk about is called Our Stories Carried Us Here. This is by various different creators. This was originally a Kickstarter book, so
nice.
It was actually easy to find some information on this small comic, which is not always the case. This is an anthology of stories by immigrants and refugees, and so there's all these different writing styles and art styles. And these creators came from all over the world: Kazakhstan, Liberia, Myanmar, Jamaica, Guatemala, Mexico, Chad, Vietnam, Yemen, and Pakistan. And they're all now in the United States writing comics. I don't know a whole lot about this book other than that there is some art examples in the Kickstarter link, which is in our show notes, or you can just Google it. It was pretty easy to find. So I think I'm going to pick this up. And I think I think that having comics like this right now is really important because of everything that's happening in the world. And I think having more available on the market is important for to generate empathy from people that live otherwise very comfortable lives, like me.
Yeah, I mean, this looks awesome, honestly. Cover by Nate Powell, who you folks probably know from he was the artist on the March series with what was it,
John Lewis.
Yeah, Congressman John Lewis. But yeah, I mean, this looks, I mean, bunch of 15 to 20 page stories. This looks awesome. I can't believe I didn't see this on Kickstarter. I'm usually pretty on the nose with that stuff. Or up, I don't know what the phrase is. I'm pretty good at that stuff. Me good at Kickstarter. Okay.
So far, I haven't seen it on pop up yet on Comixology. It's not out yet, so that could be the reason. But I am seeing that it's getting like an actual print run. So I'm hoping that my comic shop will just kind of have this on their shelves already. But if not,
Kate, you gotta call them a pre-order.
I know. Yeah, I imagine if I go in, even after it's released, and they'll probably order a couple of extra copies to put on their shelves. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, this looks cool. I'm going to check this out myself. Well, for me this week, I guess before I get into it, I want to shout out some of our folks on Discord who gave us their picks on what they're reading next. Danny said that they're reading Fear State Alpha #1. Brian's reading Kent State. Because he said that he didn't want to be happy this weekend, so he's reading about Kent State. Hugh is reading The Many Deaths of Layla Starr #5, and Stingo is reading TMNT Color Classics Volume 1 for our Goodreads reading challenge, which we highly recommend everybody go and participate in, because it's a series of kick butt books as far as I'm concerned. For me, though, I am excited for Night Bus. This is a book coming out from Drawn and Quarterly. It's by Zuma. And the story is, I don't know, just the concept of this and the cover really sold me. I don't know what this is, but I usually feel like if I take a risk on like a Fantagraphics or a Drawn and Quarterly book, 95% of the time, I'm usually pretty satisfied. With this book, the story is, in Night Bus, a young woman wearing round glasses finds herself on an adventurous late-night bus ride that constantly makes detours through increasingly fantastical landscapes. Meanwhile, a young cartoonist returns home after art school and tries his hand at becoming a working artist while watching over his aging grandmother whose memory is deteriorating. Nostalgic leaps take us to an elementary school gymnasium that slowly morphs into a swamp and is raided by giant catfish. Beetles, salamanders, and bug-eyed fish intrude upon the bus ride of the round glasses woman as the night stretches on. Night Bus blends autobiography, horror, and fantasy into vibrantly detailed surreal world that shows a distinct talent surveying his past. So I'm all for this. This sounds really cool. Sounds like a trippy ride, and this is the kind of comic that I just love to dig in my face into sometimes when I can, just because it's interesting, and it's just like an interesting graphic novel. I don't know how else to describe it. I like weird comics sometimes, guys, and this sounds like a weird comic, right? Leave me alone. Nick, Kate, you guys are coming at me too hard right now.
It definitely sounds like the AI machine learning novels are starting to really come into prevalence based on the description of that book.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that this is from an underground Chinese cartoonist. So this is originally published in China, translated and brought over by Drawn and Quarterly. And I love seeing original graphic novels like this come in from other countries, because I feel like the way that folks in basically not in the United States or not in the West focus, not in like the United States, like continuous United States in terms of Canada and Mexico and so on and so forth, but I feel like they approach graphic novels way differently than in general, or than like what we expect, where there's a lot more just less chapter marking, just continuous flowing stories. And just from the preview that you get of this book, it seems like there's going to be a lot of meandering and really interesting ways to tell this story, and I just love the look of some of the pages in this that we get to see. So yeah, I'm very excited to check it out. That's all. Yes, it does sound like someone mashed together a bunch of different ideas, but sometimes graphic novels are a little fantastical.
Right? Like,
yeah.
And then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and with me, it's like, okay, sure,
yeah,
that's fine. It's
Find
your
a way to
story.
weave this all together. Yeah,
it's your story.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna probably try to grab that. Might have to order that from my comic shop, just because I don't think I'm gonna be able to get it otherwise. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about our Goodreads Book of the Month, The Promised Neverland, Volume 1, as voted upon by our Goodreads members, all 800 plus of them. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back for that. This week on I Read Comic Books, we are talking about our Goodreads book of the month for the month of August. That would be The Promised Neverland, Volume 1, published by Viz in the United States. Written by Kaiu Shirai and art by Posuka Demizu, plus their assistants. We're going to go into full spoilers for this book, or at least for the first volume. And that would be chapters 1 through 7 if you're reading on the Shonen Jump app like some of us did. But yeah, our theme for this month was translated comics, so we picked a manga, which is fantastic. Love reading manga. Kait, you've got a nice little summary for us. You want to read us through that before we dig into our discussion?
In this book, 38 kids and their guardian that they call Mom live in an orphanage ringed by a forest, a fence, and then a big wall. The kids are tested daily. Emma, Norman, and Ray are the eldest at 11 years old and also score the highest on the tests. One day, 6-year-old Connie is adopted and sent to the gate. Emma and Norman follow against the rules, and they see Connie's body, 2 demons, and Mom working with the demons. It turns out that the orphanage is actually a farm for human brains. Emma, Norman, and Ray are the next harvest, which is 2 months away. Emma insists that they can escape and that they will take all of the kids with them. Mom knows someone saw the crime scene through the use of a very simple tracker, and then she brings in the help of another adult. The volume ends with the kids still developing their plan, the new adult assistant planning to frame Mom for something and steal her position. And then we see a view of the Demon King and his entourage at a dining table.
Yeah. So this book was not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that right off the bat. What were your initial thoughts on this, Kait?
So first of all, I was very glad that we had a manga as a book of the month pick. I'm not sure that this manga is going to encourage more manga. It definitely turned into it turned from a slice of life about orphans, very cute story with a really upbeat protagonist, and then it turned into soft science fiction and horror. My general thoughts were that I liked the idea of it, but for some reason I was not gripped by it enough to probably read more of it.
Oh, interesting. Very curious about that. But Nick, what were your overall thoughts of this?
I knew the moment that the orphans, I was going to say inmates, but maybe that's
wow,
equally appropriate. The moment that they had neck tattoos with numbers on them, I knew that this book was like any hope of this being joyful and happy and whatnot sort of went out the window. That was it. Certainly some of the other mangas that I've encountered sort of have this sort of oh, everything is happy, everything is joyful, everything is good, sort of on the surface level, and then underneath blah 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 blah, blah is happening, right? So general feelings about this book, it reminded me a lot of Death Note, and I know that some people are going to say that doesn't make sense, or other people are going to say you've probably only Beyond This read Death Note, and so that's what you're trying to compare it with, and that's all mangas are the same, Nick. Which okay, yeah, you're absolutely right. But and we can get into this later, but the element of this book that becomes pretty evident, at least maybe within the first 2 chapters, and then it's just inescapable for the rest of this book, is that it's very much, hey, do you want to sit through internal monologuing from several characters showing you how smart they are and how they've thought through everything? Are you interested in that? I hope so, because it's the whole book. It's the whole book. Basically, it's like showing your work, right? When your math teacher or whatever is okay, you arrived at this answer, now show me your work. And this whole book is show me your work, right? It's let's go through my whole thought process.
Sure.
And American comics haven't cracked the code. American comics, I say American comics, Western comics, other comics. And this problem, I don't think, is exclusive to manga either. But I have noticed a lot of the manga that I've read, everyone can say, Nick, you're reading the wrong manga. That's fine. Has a lot of this internal narration, this internal thought process. And it's very prevalent, and it goes on for a lot of the book. And it's just interesting because obviously superhero comics, for example, again, I'm not saying they're the best thing or they've fixed any of the problems, but the thought bubble doesn't exist anymore, right? Like it really doesn't.
Depending on the book, I mean, the thought bubble has been replaced by captions
By
in a lot of
captions,
ways.
right? But even despite the fact that it's been replaced by captions, like lengthy internal narration sequences aren't really as prevalent anymore as they used to be.
Sure. I mean, but okay, we're getting off topic of your general thoughts about this because I want to talk about that. But
We can talk about that later. I mean, but yeah, overall, I'm on the fence. I think the book, Volume 1, leaves enough questions that I am kind of interested about that I would consider Volume 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I guess my overall thoughts of this is just really quick here is that, you know, this book, whatever the secret was, you know, the secret behind this book being it's like, oh no, it's demons, has been kept well under wraps by me because I had no clue what this was. I feel like I get this book confused with a couple of other ones that have like kind of a cast of redheaded, all white wearing like protagonists. And I don't know why, and I don't really know what those other mangas are, but I for some reason just kind of saw this as like something where it's like, oh, these kids as a group, they escape and they do something. I don't know why they escape, but they did something. I thought they were all inmates, genuinely, because they all have these numbers on them, which makes you think like barcodes and all this weird stuff. So the fact that the reveal of it, oh no, it's demons, is actually like was the thing was interesting. I also thought that turning this book from a, oh no, we need to escape like action shonen into more of a like mental process, who's smarter than who, like kind of manga, was interesting as well, because I find that there are not a lot of those. Well, I mean, I guess that's maybe not true. I don't necessarily read enough manga to say that there aren't a lot of those, but I will say like other ones that I have read, Nick, you pointed out Death Note. I think another one is like Dr. Stone, can be like this in a lot of ways. I think Conan, or excuse me, Case Closed, if you read that, is kind of like that, where it's all about, I thought about this and you thought about this, but they didn't know that I thought about that. They thought about, you know, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You get a little bit up your own ass about things, but I do think that there's like a compelling something about that drives a really suspenseful side of the story. Like Hikaru no Go goes into this, Assassination Classroom does this every once in a while. And I like that suspension that they create because it's artificial, but in a way that still feels tenuous, and but it doesn't involve the characters actually playing out those things. It's like when someone's telling you about a heist in a heist movie, and then at the end of the thing, and it looks like they're doing it in the movie, but then it turns out that was just them talking about what could happen, and the real heist was different. Like I like that kind of action, like adventure, that is simulated within the narrative in order to kind of like get you on the edge of your seat before the actual thing happens. So I like that bit about this book. I did find it, like I said, and I think Nick and I were talking about this last night. It very much goes like, and she doesn't know that we know that she thinks that we know. Like it gets really up its own butt about that sometimes. But I think that each chapter introduced enough tension that it kept me wanting to read more. And the wrap up in the end of volume, or chapter 7, the last one in the volume, was really good. And I want to keep reading. I want to know more about this, at least to dive into the next volume to see how did they get out. Because like the thing I found out about comics like this, like Attack on Titan, for instance, of like we have this very closed world. We know that the world is big, but the universe in which the characters live in is very small. So like Attack on Titan, they're stuck in the big walls where there are titans on the outside they can't leave. As soon as you get out of that, there's like a really make or break moment for those kind of stories. It's either going to fall flat on its face, and I feel like Attack on Titan did a little bit personally, or it's going to super excel, and I don't know what that looks like. But Attack on Titan does make up for itself, so I'm curious to know what Promise Neverland does once these kids do get out, because assuming they will, that's the story, there's no way they keep everything inside the orphanage. So
well, I think there's like 19 volumes, so
yeah,
God willing they get out, because otherwise
yeah,
like seriously.
Yeah, so like, you know, this book is kind of it's interesting. I think, like, I don't know, Kait, what were some of your highlights of the book? What were some of the things you liked about it?
I both liked and disliked the main trio of characters.
Okay.
I think that it's an interesting combination of like stereotypes to put together to make them friends. Like Emma was very chipper and was like kind of the go-getter. She's the one that is trying to come up with how to get everybody out of there. And then you have Ray, who is I don't want to call him a brooding character, because he doesn't brood so much as that he's just very quiet and like in his own head. If somebody is going to like turn bad and sell them out to the adults, it's Ray.
No, absolutely not. Oh, I 100%
No, it's
disagree
absolutely
with
the other
yeah.
kid.
Norman.
It's definitely yes. It's
Well,
definitely
It's
Norman.
so Norman.
He's too smart for his own good.
Ray does not
They
care
are.
enough to even figure out, that Ray doesn't care about that.
Ray just wants to survive, whereas Norman wants to do anything that he can to take power.
He is
That's my
too
read on the
eager
characters.
to help.
Well,
He is-
Norman.
I do want to hear your justification though on this though, because I don't want to just shoot you down.
He says, he insinuates, I guess, that he has a crush on Emma, and that he knows that they probably won't survive getting all of the kids out as well as themselves, but he's like, I just want to see her happy, so I'm going to do whatever she tells me to do. So I guess I can see where you're coming from. But on the other hand, I did actually write in my notes that I feel like Norman is the least predictable of the trio, because I feel like he is quiet and smart, but he really, like, I feel like Ray and Emma have both fallen into a stereotype that I have seen a million times, whereas Ray, I don't know what his role is here other than a supporting role.
Well, they like paint him as like the grounded one, right? Like the one who sort of can
He's
take
the chess player. Yeah.
Like he can take like Norman might be the smartest, but he doesn't know how to apply his smarts to real world applications. And I guess that's where they see Ray as the one who can actually manipulate that into something, something workable, right? So I think in that way, obviously, Norman wants to do whatever it takes to make what's her face happy, and she obviously wants to make sure everybody lives, but I think Ray just doesn't care, and that's great. He just wants to sit by the tree with a book or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, except for the part where he followed them out into the forest to see what they were doing. Like he knew something was up.
Oh yeah.
But I think that's what continuously makes this book interesting. I think if Emma was by herself, this book wouldn't feel as fun. It would be very much like her just fucking about, like, because I like her character a lot. Like the idea that she's extremely smart, she's very like athletic and dexterous. I think we're going to probably see a little bit of that in the future. But she's not like the greatest strategist, or she's not like the greatest leader. Everyone loves her or all the little kids love her and stuff because it seems like she likes to play and she's very empathetic with them. But she's not the person that's going to necessarily take charge and lead on things. Even though it was kind of her to drive this whole, we need to go do this thing. And, her heart was the reason why they saw this awful demon in the first place. But I think with the trio, it allows for the story to have a couple different facets. And this kind of brings me to a point that I wanted to get to, unless you guys wanted to talk more about the trio, but about like the perspective shifts that we saw in this book. Where not that perspective shifts are completely unreal and on impossible in different books. I think even in like One Piece, you get to see, the villains, what they're doing as the heroes are doing something like that, because we as the audience get to be on edge for everything that's happening. But I really thought that, the mystery of Mom and the mystery of what was the second woman that came in, I wrote it down somewhere, but I lost it. But the two adults, like the perspective of what they were doing and like what the mystery was and why they as humans, human adults, were helping these demons. I thought all of that was really interesting to actually see rather than have the kids discover. We actually got that perspective change and seeing kind of inside the heads of multiple characters and getting what Nick was talking about before, those thought bubbles where we can see people thinking, was a really interesting way to tell the story, because I felt like showing the mom side of things was way more telling, and almost kind of took me out of the mystery of the story, because in my mind, we should never know what she's thinking or what she's doing, because otherwise then how are we able to watch this chess game without feeling like we already know what's going to happen,
Yeah, and I think they probably felt, I think the creators of this book probably felt that I think on some level you had to at least, I mean, I guess maybe you don't, thinking about it now, but maybe you have to at least establish that the mom is in fact up to something, right? Like,
sure,
that you have to at least prove that these kids, I mean, it would be kind of fun if like these kids are convinced for like 10 volumes of a book that mom is evil and doing all of this stuff, and then it turns out mom's not doing anything. That would be hilarious.
Well, we still don't know though, right? Like we don't know if she's been forced into this. Like obviously there's like a power struggle between mom and the woman that she brings on, but still it's a question of like, is mom doing this to save her own hide, or is mom doing this because she's forced to, or is mom doing this because she wants to? You know, I think that's still a question that they didn't completely answer.
Yeah, I don't buy that she just wants these kids to go be harvested and murdered and eaten. Like she's kept them alive for 11 years, which is more than most of the kids have stayed around.
Right.
And she's like, when she brings she brings the assistant in, but then she's telling the assistant that no, even though these kids are kind of onto what they're doing, she still doesn't want them to be harvested early. She still wants them to make their original date. Like, I think that mom kind of wants them to escape.
Maybe.
I don't
Did
know.
this destroy your argument here, Nick?
Like,
or are you just like an absolute opposite of this?
Well, like the whole idea, right, is that seemingly, ideally, kids who are shown to have an intellectual proficiency are allowed to stay, so to speak, right? With the idea that the end cap for that is 12, right? This is kind of established.
Yeah, it's like maximum
right.
tastiness when they hit 12 and are super smart or something.
Right. So kind of the implication, which is sort of weird because I think the Goodreads summary took this for a given, or maybe it was coming from someone who had read more, but like we start to think, and the protagonists start to think, that maybe the true value here is brains, right? It's not just, or, you know, involving, you know, oh, they want the whole body or whatever, or they want to eat everything. The whole idea seemingly is moving more towards the direction of brains, right? Which I guess, I don't know. The big thing for me is still mom having a barcode, I guess, tattoo. It's not a barcode. Having the number tattoo of her own. That's kind of the little detail that I've sort of honed in on and am very curious about. Because it would certainly make you think that she was, if not in this orphanage, in a different orphanage, right? And how did she get from a position of being in the orphanage to not having to be part of the system that an orphanage usually runs on? Unless, and now I feel like I'm one of the protagonists in this book as I start my own flowchart of unless, and I'm hating myself for it. Unless, as they talk about, we're now in a world where demons control everything, and maybe they control all humans, and all humans, regardless of whether they're in an orphanage or not, have a number. Maybe it's not an orphanage thing. Maybe it's a human thing.
Well, we don't, but we don't know where the numbers come from. And like, there was that moment at the end where they're trying to figure out where the tracking devices are.
Yeah.
My first thought was like, what's the most invasive thing that they do to you as a child? They give you a fucking tattoo. Come on. It's right there. It's so obvious.
Oh, yeah. Oh, same. I was like, it's the fucking tattoo.
Yeah. So I thought that was, you know, interesting, but again, they I feel like they jump through a lot of the mystery pretty quickly in this, you know, like we need to figure out how we're getting tracked. We need to figure out this. We need to figure out that. I feel like in any other manga, any other comic book, they could have drawn any of those elements out for multiple issues just to drive up the page count, right? I feel like this story is pretty snappy with trying to unravel bits of the mystery, but you know, like for every question answered, there's 3 more questions. I think that's been one of the more cleverer parts, which ends up with the more, you know, some of the, well, she doesn't know that we know that she does, you know, all that stuff that I was saying before. But I still think that it allows the mystery to continue to build with suspense without feeling like anything's being dragged out, you know?
Well, and much like you said about Attack on Titan, and of course this is coming from the perspective as someone who knows that this title goes on for at least like 19 volumes, so that's something to keep in mind. It does make you wonder, at the rate that they're sort of like ripping through all of these things, just going, solving this. Like, you'd like to think that can't keep up forever. And as you said, at a certain point, they get out.
Mm-hmm.
What does the book become when it's no longer sort of like a great escape heist kind of caper, right? Like, what does the book transform into at that point?
True.
Because you'd have to believe that it's not going to continue being what it is. You know, I'm worried, what are these kids going to do when they just can't show off how smart they are all the time? Like, what are they going to do for fun? It concerns me. So
yeah, I get that. Kate, did you have any similar concerns or anything like that?
I guess that my biggest hang up with this manga that I otherwise like, I really did kind of enjoy this whole conceit of they're being harvested and they have to figure out how to escape. Like, I can get into that. But what really hung me up was all of this intrigue. I'm really not interested in like who has the power when, who's got the one up thing. I don't like chess. I mean, I don't like chess.
Is it really a manga if chess doesn't come into play though?
It's not a manga that has intrigue without chess. Yeah.
I mean, this one has Go as well. So I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah.
True. But like, I was still in it. Like, I could still see that like the kids escaping has to do a lot with what mom is doing. That was still okay with me. But then we get the assistant coming in, and suddenly she's like, she's trying to figure out which specific kids have figured this out, because even though I think mom probably knows, she hasn't told this assistant. But instead of actually like really digging into this and also being like a big threat to our protagonists, instead she's like, I'm gonna take mom's position. I'm gonna make it like, I'm gonna frame her for something, or I'm going to make her look weak, and I'm going to have her job. And I'm like, why? Why is this needed? We already have
Humans
enough.
are an interesting animal in that they all are struggling for power.
Well, I mean, it's like they're obviously trying to like find a way to put mom in a vulnerable position, right? Like, that's clearly, which I don't even understand. Like, why is mom in a vulnerable position? I don't get this. The kids are very smart. Obviously, the demons want smart kids. The demons draw the line at 12. The kids aren't 12. So why is mom getting in trouble?
Because she didn't report that kids had seen the demons. The idea is that if they know that they're being harvested, that they need to be taken away immediately.
Okay.
But mom has some other plan. I think that's pretty much what it comes down to. I mean, but go ahead, Kate. Go ahead.
I feel like we're being very judgmental of this series, so I just wanted to pop in here and say that our Goodreads reviewers, we didn't have any okay to air people, but the consensus is the first volume has good pacing and good tension, which I do have to agree with.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm reading more of this book. Like, I'm knocking on this book, but if only because I'm mad that more wasn't revealed, which good. That's what you want out of a book. Like I said, every question that was answered left me with more questions, and that's what I think drives a book like this. Because if it's not something that's going to just tell like a story about someone gaining success, like a Hikaru no Go or something, but Death Note, is another example. And I think we keep coming back to those two because I think they're very similar in terms of just like the way that tension is built. But watching like figuring out how they're going to get out of this wild thing next is definitely like the intrigue and the interest part of this. And I want to see, like to Nick's point before, like what happens when they get out of here? What happens when they cross the wall? Do they meet more kids? Are there more farms? We know that there are. So like maybe other kids have escaped. What happens when you find the other kids who have escaped? Are there rebels? Is there like a human agency that's trying to fight back against these demons? Is it just a small sect of demons that have conscripted these people and steal babies and tattoo? Like, tons of questions that I have that I want answered because I heard this series was good and I've heard positive things. So I don't know if it was canceled or if it ended naturally. And so I'm excited to just get through all that. And plus 19 volumes is nothing. Easy peasy.
I think it's still ongoing, actually.
Is it still going? Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I would say this, like, yeah, I think some of the frustration really does boil down to like, we don't have all the answers yet, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It does, get all self-obsessed with the, I know this and you know that, but we know that you don't know that, and and sometimes that's a little fun, and sometimes it's rather annoying. But as you said, which I said that you said, this book probably won't be this forever. So if you don't like this, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I can't imagine that this book can sustain this forever. And I'd like to see more of such things as like some of the other characters. I'd like to learn more about some of the other characters. I imagine the book gets into that. Also, the world building has suggested such things as like what we learned that books stopped being printed in 2015 apparently, and this is taking place in like 2043, but there's no modern technology in the house. So what's going on in the outside world? So there's some little subtle world building hints that the outside world is a very different place than we know. And I think getting to see more of what the outside world actually looks like, for me, that's pretty compelling. Like, I'm interested in that, you know, because we've seen like phones, we've seen radios, we've seen a truck, but like, and I say that because like, it's not like we're seeing like spaceships or anything, right? Like, we're not seeing like Elon Musk rockets or anything. Like, we're seeing technology that's not that far removed from our own, but you still kind of wonder about where that all stands. So
for the record, Promised Neverland does end naturally at chapter 181. So
oh my god,
it is over.
Okay,
just for the record.
Wow, that's pretty long.
Kate, were you going to jump into something?
If I was, I don't remember what it was.
Okay. Well, I don't know. My overall thoughts, I think we covered a lot of stuff that I was thinking about with this book. I don't know, Kate, you and I read kind of a bit more manga than Nick. Nick, I know getting you on an episode like this is tough. So are you okay after having read a manga that I didn't recommend to you for months and months and months?
Yeah. I mean, look, like, I got on this episode because I'm chasing that next great manga, right? Like, I need the trifecta. I got on this because I was like, I need to find the next good one after Way of the House Husband and Delicious in Dungeon. And I'm just absolutely tearing through Delicious in Dungeon right now. So I am desperately on the hunt for something new. And I thought, well, being on this episode maybe would be like an opportunity for me to find a new one. And I'm not so sure that this is the next one for me, but I'm also not saying that I'm never going to read this one ever again.
Gotcha.
But and I'm not picky. I just need a book that's like not all action. I just don't need a book that's like like so obsessed with humor that it doesn't actually have a look. I have a list. Okay, people, just send me your recommendations.
I was going to say, if you folks out there have suggestions for non-battle manga, essentially, non-battle shonen manga that you think Nick would like, that's got some humor, but also has some like good world building and story, I think, send us your recommendations and we can try to get Nick on this manga train.
And I know that like it's easy to sort of think like, oh, Nick doesn't want to read Naruto, Nick doesn't want to read Dragon Ball, so like what Nick wants is something like dark and mature and brooding and like
just read Berserk
for educated adults or whatever. And like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Like, Way of the House Husband and Delicious in Dungeon are definitely not like dark, sophisticated like works.
But they're both some of the best manga that you can read. Well, I guess, Kate, did you have any final thoughts about this book?
Yeah, my last note that I had was a good summary of my thoughts, which is to say that I like manga and smart protagonists and science fiction and light horror and all the things that this book is. But the story itself was both like a lot and also not really enough for me.
Wow. Nice. I like that. I like that. I think that's a good summary because I think it tries to do a lot of things without doing any of them fully and in a way that is not compelling. I definitely can agree with that. Do you think you'll keep reading though? Do you think you'll try volume 2 just to see how it feels?
I don't know. I mean, You're right, or maybe it was Nick that said this, but the world that they've set up is very compelling. Like, are all demons bad? Are these the only demons? Are all humans subjugated? Are these the only humans?
Mm-hmm.
And I am interested in like I've looked at some of the covers for the following volumes, and it looks. I mean, there are probably some spoilers just by looking at the covers as to what's going to happen, and that is promising for the story for me. Like, I feel like it's this whole drama with mom and amongst mom and the assistant that I don't like the most. So if or when they get out of the orphanage, I think that I would be more interested in this world. But I don't know. It really feels like that's going to be the next couple of volumes, and I don't know that I want to slog through that to get to what interests me.
Totally get that. Nick, any final thoughts from you on this book? Think you'll keep reading?
I mean, I'd probably have to pick up the Shonen Jump app to really do that at a cost-efficient way of doing things. So I guess I would also say that to all of the listeners. Given what you know about my reading interests, is there enough for me to pick up the Shonen Jump app? I'm just crowdsourcing all my decisions at this point. Because it seems like so many of the Shonen Jump, or at least the ones that do really well and make the big money, are battle manga. Am I wrong? I feel like I can make that statement.
The big ones that you see that are promoted the most are usually the battle manga and
One
action
Piece,
shonen. Yeah, One Piece,
My Hero
Academia, Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super. But at the same time, there are some very successful books like Blue Box, I think is a fan favorite of ours on the Discord. Blue Flag was another one. Strangely, both have the word blue in them. That are kind of on the more like romantic, like shoujo style, can be a little cringy, but ultimately it's pretty good. But like, yeah, I don't think it's all like that. There's some detective stories. There's like Jujutsu Kaisen, which is just a straight up like action demon story. So yeah, but Shonen Jump for the most part pushes that type of story. I think if you're looking for something that's going to be less that direction, you might want to wander over to the Kodansha subscription service that they have, because you could get Attack on Titan, which is great. But also they have a bit more range in terms of their comics. Not by much, then their stuff usually ends up being a little bit darker. But ultimately, it has a little bit more range, I think, than Shonen Jump. That being said, anyone out there who's probably more familiar with things, send your recommendations our way and let us know what you think. Either way, both of those subscription services are super cheap.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess that would be my final thought, is that I'm looking for everyone else's final thoughts.
Cool. Yeah, because it's perfect that if anybody makes a bad recommendation, you can blame them and not yourself, right?
That's how I live my life. Yes.
Sorry, not to call you out on the show, but I totally did. My final thoughts are, I'm probably going to read the next few volumes of this just to see how it feels, because I liked what I read and I've heard really good things about this. So I figure let's dig into it. I probably should finish Jujutsu Kaisen before I do that, even though I think I'm like 75-ish chapters in, so that means I'm about halfway through. So I'm probably going to do that, and then I'll jump right back onto Promised Neverland.
Yeah,
I can't wait till you get to like Promised Neverland Volume 2 and I just get a text that says, they're all dead. I'm like, what?
Yeah, the story took a drastically different direction.
Yeah, let me know.
The story's all about mom. What? Really?
Yeah, let me know how far you get, and if it does become more about the rest of the world and away from the stuff I don't like.
Yeah, of course. I'll keep you posted.
Kait just has a real deep-seated hatred for orphans, and that's where this all comes from.
Well, I guess with that being said, thanks for listening this week, everybody. Next week's topic is going to be the mini-sode between me and Nick. We're going to be talking about Ice Cream Man Volume 5. Finally, after so much time, and I have a big reveal for that episode because I did a bad thing. You can always follow us on Twitter. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans, Kait at Kait Elfier, and you can follow me at Mike Rappin, and the show on Twitter and Instagram at IRCB Podcast.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. You can join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. And you can join now at patreon.com/IRCB IRCB Podcast. And if you haven't already, please rate and review our show. 5 stars would be great on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps us spread the word about IRCB.
Join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more, and listen to our episodes live as we record at ircbpodcast.com/discord. And it would help us a lot if you tell your friends at your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Xander is the cool guy who makes us sound cool, and he's ice cold, baby. I want to say thanks to Nick and Kait for being on this episode. Thanks to everyone at the Discord who hung out with us. It was really fun to chat with everybody live and talk during the break. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.